View of Vision Zero and the Safe System approach, as well as review the key tasks that would be completed as a part of the process. And then during the second task force meeting, we shared the preliminary high injury network and did a deeper dive into the regional crash analysis. And some of the key takeaways there that crashes that result in a serious injury or fatality are more likely to happen on high-speed multi-lane roadways where there's a lot of competing demands on the function of that roadway, including accommodating transit and providing direct access to land uses. So more detailed information and a link to those recordings was provided in the summaries. So with that, we'll jump right into an overview of the public engagement strategies. So I'm going to get started and then I'll ask Cynthia to jump in and fill in any of the gaps that I might have missed. So from the regional plan level, we're really looking at primarily online engagement through social media. We've put up the hub site. You can see a link here on the bottom of the screen. So while I don't want everybody to be distracted by going over to the hub site, the link is there so you can go start checking it out. You will find there a comment map where we're encouraging members of the public to go in and place comments in places where they feel unsafe driving, walking, bicycling, riding a motorcycle, kind of trying to capture those near miss analyses and get various levels of feedback. We also have that translated into Spanish and Haitian Creole. We also have our speaker series, which was kicked off a couple of weeks ago, an upcoming press conference. We put together some fact sheets. I'll share one of those in a minute, putting together an elected officials guide. And then there's a number of local agency events that are planned as part of the county and all of the local agency plans as well. So Cynthia, did I miss any of those big picture things we wanted to touch on?
I'll mention just a couple of additional things. Catherine mentioned she didn't want you to get distracted, but please do bookmark this. Go ahead and go to it in the browser, visionzerocfl.gov, and bookmark it for yourself, because really this is kind of, we call it a hub site because it's a living document. We will continue adding resources to it throughout this whole process. And so this is where you'll find a lot of the information that you can share with your technical teams, with your elected officials, and with members of the public, your neighbors as well. And so that is the main website that you want you to be aware of. In just a little bit, we will show you a Vision Zero video that we have created that is really meant to explain the need for Vision Zero and to demonstrate that these statistics are not just numbers, they affect lives. And so this is something that we encourage you to use, whether it's sharing online or if you are having a meeting or an event where you're talking about Vision Zero and you want just kind of a very concise recap. The video is less than 4 minutes. And it's meant to pull at some heartstrings and really make people care about this process and be supportive of it. So we encourage you also to write down that second URL at the bottom of the screen, which is the short link to the video. And that is hosted on the Metro Planet Orlando YouTube channel. We will also, Catherine mentioned, we had our first speaker series earlier this month, and the theme was on uniting on a quest for zero traffic deaths. And it was in conjunction with the World Day of Remembrance for road traffic victims. And so we are also partnering with drivingdownheartache.org. So if you come across community members that have been personally affected by crashes and they really have a desire to share those stories, we would encourage you to direct them to drivingdownheartache.org. This is a website that has been set up by safety advocate Melissa Wandel. She's been very active in passing legislation in the state and this kind of goes nationwide to carry the safety message around. But she was personally affected by the death of her husband in a crash. And so that's what moved her to set up this website. But it's really just a very peaceful place for people to share their own stories if they're ready and willing. And so we would encourage you to if you have a need to send people somewhere to share their personal stories, that we would go there. And I mentioned we are partnering with them. So the folks at Driving Down Heartache have a process to let us know when people from our area do submit stories there. And my colleague Marianne is dropping some links in the chat box that you might want to save and share for yourselves. So that's what I've got. Back to you, Catherine, for a couple other items.
Great, thanks so much. So here on the screen, this is just an example of one of the Vision Zero fact sheets that we have prepared. So we have one of these for each jurisdiction in the region who's preparing a plan, and it really highlights the regional statistics as well as the local statistics for that plan area, as well as what elements will be included in their action plan, and then ways to get involved. And as you can see, we have the QR code to the regional hub site, really wanting to make it easy for folks to get more information. So we have a couple other fact sheets that are in the works. So we'll be working on one for each of the high injury networks, really highlighting some of those key statistics. And then as part of the regional plan for the regional high injury network, we'll be preparing some fact sheets for the top 30 segments. And then that will be used to really help us start to identify with the various agency partners what are some countermeasures that can be considered for each of those segments. So those are some things that are underway. And let's see, next up we have the video. So just hit play here.
Well, I have been in Central Florida for 24 years.
I have a lot of friends that have been in accidents, like really bad accidents.
One minute you can be here and the next minute you can be gone.
I was in an accident and the car just flipped out. My mom got injured, the back of her neck. It had a negative effect on us.
And just a train, the train, there's a car right in front of us and then boom, ow.
Fue un accidente bastante grave. Pasé por 2 cirugías. Aún estoy en muchos tratamientos y actualmente todavía no me he recuperado del todo. Las lesiones que deja un accidente son garrafales.
I had a couple good friends die from a drunk driver. One was like a grandfather to me.
My sister's husband was killed in a car accident, and it affected not only her life, but her children's life, their grandchildren's lives.
My youngest nephew was killed recently, earlier this year, in a bicycle versus pickup truck. It was such a shock to hear of his death. We do love him. We miss him.
Just made me think about my life a little bit more. That could have been me, it could have been anybody.
Okay, people here they're not everybody, but there are enough crazy drivers. They're in a hurry. They don't care. They'll run red lights.
Well, you got to be cautious. You got to have your eyes all around you.
Some of the streets don't have crosswalks or crossing guards, more or less. It's just kids' safety is really my concern in Central Florida.
There's 3 different memorials that I see. It's a young man who was on a skateboard at 6 a.m. that ended up being killed by a car. And almost right across the street from where he died, a 77-year-old man was killed on a bicycle.
And people should be concerned about that.
If there were no more pedestrian accidents or traffic accidents at all, a lot more people will be outside enjoying life.
Where people's not afraid to walk down the street, cross the street, ride their bike.
Be great. Be great.
And people would just be happier, honestly, just going outside, having fun with their families.
Si me imagino el mundo, si nadie muriera en un accidente, pues sí, sería muy, muy bueno.
With no accidents, that'd be wonderful.
I imagine the world would be an incredible place because when you see those markers and you think of the folks, what futures they had or could have had, what could they have contributed to our community, to our society, to their families.
And you start thinking about these things and wonder if there could have been something that could have prevented that from happening.
Everybody want to live their life. Everybody want to enjoy freedom. Everybody want to, just live life to the fullest.
And I just want to take a moment to thank RJ, who was interviewed in the video. He is on the call today. We know it's a difficult thing to share your personal experiences, so we appreciate you doing that for the benefit of everyone in the region.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, definitely a very moving video, and I've now seen it a few times, and every time I get goosebumps. So before we move on to the next section here, just wanted to pause to see if there were any questions or feedback on the video or any of the other engagement strategies that we shared. Right, well, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Let's see. But yeah, if things do come up, you can place a question in the chat and then we'll get to it shortly. Let's see. So I know last time we had shared sort of the draft process to develop the high injury network. So we have finalized the high injury network and are now working to really summarize some key statistics. So overall, our regional high injury network, it's about 258 miles long and consists of about 118 distinct roadway segments. So the shortest segment that we're looking at is about a half-mile long. The longest segment is about 6 miles long. And segment endpoints were identified through changes in the roadway characteristics, such as a transition from 4 to 6 lanes or a change in the context classification. So really wanting to have like segments of roadways to look at and start to identify potential countermeasures. So when we started to look a little bit deeper, we saw that on the regional high injury network, about 60% of it is on FDOT roadways, about 30% are on county roadways, and then 10% are on local jurisdiction roadways. And as you saw in the video, 41% of deaths in the region and then 47% of serious injury or fatal crashes occurred on just 2% of our roadways by centerline miles. We also did a little bit of digging to understand the posted travel speed on the high injury network, as well as the prevailing travel speeds using connected vehicle data. And so while connected vehicle data is just a sample of overall travel on a roadway, we found it useful as a screening tool. And when we've been able to compare field measured speed data with connected vehicle data, the average and 85th percentile speeds have been within a couple miles of each other. So just wanted to highlight that on the regional high injury network, the average posted speed is about 43 miles per hour, while the average 85th percentile speed throughout the course of a typical day is around 53 miles per hour. So you can see that on that high injury network, we do have fairly high rates of people speeding. We also wanted to understand how disadvantaged communities are affected by traffic crashes. And so for this analysis, we started with the US DOT Equitable Transportation Community Explorer data. So this is a relatively new data set that was just recently released. And MetroPlan Orlando is also using this new data set as the basis for the equity plan update, which is underway. And so really there's 5 main factors in that data set that are used to determine if a census tract experiences a specific disadvantage. So Some factors include climate and disaster risk burden, health vulnerability, social vulnerability, environmental burden, and then transportation insecurity. So based on this criteria, we found that about 53% of the regional high injury network runs through or bounds a disadvantaged community. And putting that in comparison, only about 25% of the regional population lives in a disadvantaged community. So you can see there is that disproportionate impact to disadvantaged census tracts. And this is important in terms of understanding those disadvantaged communities because that will be a criteria in a lot of the federal grant programs that we hope to apply for and obtain funding for some project implementation as a next step. So once we had the regional high injury network, we also worked to develop a total of 45 separate high injury networks for the region. So for most jurisdictions, 2 high injury networks were developed. One that consists of all the roadways in that jurisdiction, and then a second that consists only of roadways that jurisdiction operates and maintains. So there are a few communities that don't have any FDOT or county roadways within their city limits. So for a small subset of communities, they just have the one high injury network. And so we have forwarded all those high injury networks to the respective teams working on those various county and local action plans. And now one of our next steps is going to be to sort of consolidate and compare the regional to all of those local networks and then start identifying potential countermeasures. But through this process, really, we're looking at all the roadways in the region, so that top-down, bottom-up look. So the bulk of our analysis and discussion has been focused on non-limited access facilities. So just wanted to take a minute to highlight some of the KSI crashes that do occur on limited access facilities, including toll roads in our region. So in total, about 18% of the regional crashes that result in somebody being killed or severely injured occur on limited access facilities. And you can see based on this map that it's pretty well dispersed throughout all of those major roadways. And then you might be surprised to see the number of pedestrian involved crashes on these limited access facilities. But when you dig into the crash data a little bit more, the vast majority of those are somebody where their vehicle broke down and they were outside their vehicle, either trying to change a tire or walking to get help when they were struck. And then on the motorcyclist crash sides, motorcyclists are involved in about 13% of all KSI crashes regionally, regardless of facility type. So you can see they're slightly overrepresented on the limited access facilities. And then looking at some of the behavioral factors, you can see distracted driving, aggressive driving, hit and run, and alcohol involvement are some of the most common behavioral factors. And then when looking at crash types, over a third are rear end crashes. And then 25% involve drivers running off the road, about 10% are side swipes, and then 6% are rollover crashes, and about 2.5% are head-on crashes. So just wanted to provide that quick summary there. So I'm going to pause again to see if there's any questions or comments before we move on. And I'm trying not to get distracted by the chat. So Mike, if there's anything in the chat that we need to address, if you could just let me know.
This is Doug. I wondered if the aggressive driving includes, to what extent, like following too close?
Yeah, that's definitely included within the aggressive driving.
Okay.
And then you can see some of that then does result in the rear end crashes, either being distracted, following too close. Sure, we've all experienced some congestion on I-4, so we know what that can be like.
Thank you.
Aggressive driving is typically characterized as 2 or more particular violations. So following too close in and of itself might not show up as aggressive, but in combination with other things.
Right. So now we're going to transition on a discussion of sort of the framing of countermeasures and how we're planning to go about identifying those. So as we're thinking about countermeasures in the safe system framework, strategies generally
Catherine,
fall.
I'm sorry, Catherine, this
Okay.
is Humberto. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment, and thank you so much for all the information about the high injury network. One of the things when the information is being presented, if you go to the regional map, we can see that there are corridors that they go across boundaries, across counties, and also across the municipalities. Yeah, I think that how do we message these things is for people to have an understanding that part of the identification of these corridors is to give us an idea where the crashes are happening. However, our strategy, it has to be systemic, that we're not going to be just stopping at the boundaries where this is happening, because crashes are random. So if we have similar typical sections, similar development and whatnot, and there's a crash at one intersection that it just happened a year ago, it doesn't mean that a similar intersection that it doesn't have a crash, it will not happen in the future. So part of that strategy is that this has to be a holistic approach. Yes, this is where the data is happening right now. However, the strategy is going beyond boundaries, just to understand it. So I just want to make sure that we capture that message, because then it might seem to be disconnected, our approach, and this has to be holistic, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's a great comment. And, we're sharing today the high injury network, but we're working to identify sort of all the characteristics of that high injury network. And then as a subset, we'll be looking at what's the sort of the high risk network. So roadways that have similar characteristics as the high injury network. But as you point out, crashes haven't happened there yet, but there's an opportunity to be proactive and systemic with some of the countermeasure strategies. So appreciate that feedback.
Thank you.
Else before we move on? All right, so I think that's sort of a good segue in terms of how do we start identifying countermeasures and sort of what's the framing of those. So, it generally falls into two primary categories. So anticipating that human error and having countermeasures that work to address that. And then reducing crash severity such that it falls within the range of tolerance on the human body. So strategies that fall under anticipating the human error include removing conflicts. So that's eliminating the most severe conflicts between roadway users, such as the relocation of a utility pole or construction of a roundabout, provision of a median barrier. Then there's managing conflicts in time. So where those conflicts can't be removed, can they be separated in time? So that could be either through signal timing strategies or providing dedicated space for different roadway user types. And then where conflicts cannot be removed, improving the visibility of those conflicts. So that's increasing that attentiveness and awareness. And then strategies that fall under accommodating human injury really are the managing of vehicular speeds, and then implementing enforcing features just to slow traffic, because there's a relationship between crash severity and the speed of a vehicle. So we've sort of looked at this through that safe system lens, and it has some built-in redundancies to eliminate or greatly reduce the likelihood of death or a serious injury when a crash occurs. But strategies have varying levels of effectiveness as well as feasibility and implementation timeframes. So this here is pivoting from the draft safe system solution hierarchy that the FHWA developed as of July 2023. And so that is still an evolving guidance, but we've organized the various strategies by their potential range of effectiveness, and then also provided some assessment as to how long it might take to implement some of the strategies. So within this framework, really the most effective strategies include removing conflicts, minimizing hazards, and then where that's not feasible, better management of the conflicts through speed reduction strategies. And so, we understand that while removing the severe conflicts may be the most effective given a specific crash problem, it may not be the most feasible given limited resources, funding, construction time, right-of-way, and a host of other factors. So this is sort of the lens at which we're starting to think about those potential countermeasures. So to aid in the selection of some appropriate countermeasures, we've been working on finalizing the countermeasure toolkit that we introduced during our last call, and we're very close to having a draft to share with everyone, so we expect to have that out within the next week or so. So within that toolkit, we have information on over 100 different engineering countermeasure, including FHWA's proven safety countermeasures. And so for each countermeasure, we've compiled some key pieces of information, including how effective the countermeasure might be in reducing the focused crash types. And this is all based on information presented in FHWA's Crash Modification Clearinghouse. We also have information on how long it might take to implement the strategy. So you can thumb through the guidebook and find things that are low cost and quick build, and then also things that might be more effective but might take more resources to implement. We also have some information on the roadway context where the strategy might be most effective, including urban, suburban, and rural place types. And then we provided information on the types of crashes that the strategy most commonly addresses, as well as the what safe system strategy the measure falls under, as well as a wide variety of considerations. So for a lot of potential countermeasures, there could be drainage implications, or it may not be appropriate to put on a route with high volumes of trucks or where you need to accommodate emergency vehicles. And then as it's available, we've also noted the appropriate FDOT design manual or traffic engineering manual reference. So you can quickly go to those other guidebooks for more detailed design information. And then lastly, a range of costs is also provided. So you can kind of get a sense of, if you're comparing a couple of different countermeasures, what might be most effective given a different cost range. So this toolkit, it's not intended to replace detailed technical analysis, but really to be kind of a quick resource guide, spur discussion at that local level, and really help us all start to identify countermeasures across the region. And so the countermeasures are organized into 7 different categories as shown here. And then, as I mentioned, a host of different considerations will need to be factored in to identify what appropriate recommendations might be for a specific roadway. And then, in addition to the engineering countermeasures, there's a host of other strategies we'll be providing some separate information on. So this might include how to develop and implement a Safe Routes to School program, targeted enforcement programs, different educational campaigns that are available. And then even, on pilot projects, you can see the city of Orlando is doing a pilot project right now on Corinne Drive, doing a protected bike lane there. So really trying to understand the range of potential strategies. I'll pause here, see if there's any questions. Umberto?
Yes, Catherine. What I wanted to ask you, so one of the strategies is to reduce the speed limit or for people to drive a little bit slower. So my question on the countermeasures, when we are looking at a speed, there's a difference between posted speed and then the context, classification speed, and the target speed. So are we going to be having some conversations as part of the countermeasures, how we want to assess what the proper speed will be for the corridor, and maybe to modify the human behavior to drive based on the countermeasures to reduce that speed so people can follow it, because I think that that would be very critical if we just go with the posted speed. And for instance, if you look at the way that we design roadways, especially when you have 4 or 6 lane dividers and you have curves, the fact that if we have a super elevation on the curves, it means that it was designed for high speed regardless. So how are we going to be able to slow down the vehicles if the geometric conditions were initially designed for that high speed? And I'm just looking at County Road 535 in Horizons West, and I said, why is my car slanted a little bit? And that was because I am at a curve with a signal, and people can go as fast as they are able to, especially on that. And the other thing that maybe this is just part of the philosophical discussion is that with these countermeasures and what we are trying to accomplish is that there is an evolution of the corridor. When we do capacity improvement projects and we go from 2 to 4 lanes or from 4 lanes to 6 lanes, and we design for 20 years, the implication is that eventually within 20 years, the roadway is going to be able to hold the capacity that it was intended. But in the beginning, until we reach those 20 years, there's going to be an excess capacity. An excess capacity, it means higher speeds. So how do we transition from all of these capacity improvements, development and whatnot? So just wanted to make sure that, I don't know if there will be an opportunity to have a discussion in terms of evolutions and the target speed, and how can we manage those as far as any strategic improvement to implement these countermeasure strategies.
Yeah, that's some great feedback there. And we do have a discussion on sort of target speeds by context classification. But some of these other details, I think, maybe we should schedule something so we can talk through how that might look in terms of the regional plan and then feeding into some of the local plans. See other comments, feedback. All right, we'll be on the lookout for the countermeasure toolkit in the next week or so. And then the next topic here is just to highlight the policy benchmarking task, which is underway. And as part of your agenda packet that you received this morning, the preliminary benchmarking spreadsheet was an attachment. So that file includes a summary of our document review, as well as the initial benchmarking and some opportunities for policy and process refinement. So shown here is a list of documents that we reviewed as part of the regional plan benchmarking process. So if you see a plan, or if you can think of a plan that's not on this list that you think we should have reviewed, please let us know so we can include that in the final documentation. And then for each document that we reviewed, we noted in the spreadsheet sort of the general purpose and contents of that document, the specific safety policies and goals contained within the document, as well as the types of safety data and analysis that was incorporated into it. We then linked the plan contents to the various core elements of Vision Zero, as well as different countermeasure categories that the plan addresses, like highway improvements, speed management, complete streets. And then we also noted potential opportunities for policy and process refinement. So we took all of that information that we gathered as part of the plan documentation, and then conducted an initial policy benchmarking. So there are sort of discussion prompts that are correlated with each of the core elements of Vision Zero. So the Fair and Peers team did an initial assessment of where we thought Metro Plan was within each of those different benchmarks. And then we got together and had a great brainstorming conversation. And on some of those benchmarks, we made refinements and took lots of notes to kind of really start identifying what some of those policy opportunities are to incorporate into the plan, as well as countermeasures and different processes. So we won't go through each of those here, but you do have the spreadsheet with the initial results to review. But we're not done. So from here, we're really looking to convene a more diverse discussion group that has some level of familiarity with the Metro Plan Orlando planning process, as well as staff from advocacy groups. So we already have a volunteer from Bike Walk Central Florida, and I know Mike will be reaching out to folks to get them to join the discussion group. So if you're interested in participating, please let us know. We would like to meet sometime within the first few weeks of the new year for an in-person discussion, and then potentially followed by some one-on-one conversations. Because really the goal here is to help identify some of the current policy weaknesses and then opportunities for further refinement to help everyone reach zero. Just want to see if there's any questions or comments about the benchmarking process or next steps. And Umberto, this might be a good opportunity to have that sort of conversation about setting target speeds and some of those other regional policy decisions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Catherine. One of the things that we have been looking is in Orange County, we have 6 commissioners, of course, and we have our mayor. So one of the questions that I was posing to Roberta Fennessy is how are we going to be developing this policy? Because it seems that there is a regional one. So my question is the regional one going to be dictating what the policies are going to be for the municipalities and the counties, or this is going to be complementary? Because part of the success, at least the way that I see it as a county, is that all the district commissioners, they need to have a say-so and also to own this policy as we develop some new projects and strategies, as we are having our budget. And now with the mayor, Mayor Demings is going to go to the BCC to get approval to put the sales tax initiative on the ballot for November. So certainly there's going to be a lot of discussions. So it has to be related on technical aspects, but also I think that based on the human aspect. And one of the conversations that we had is for the commissioners to be engaged in the policy. Each district, it has a different makeup in terms of the constituents, in terms of their economy or economic factors and what they bring to the community. So for a policy, it cannot just be one individual, but it has to be representative of the makeup of the various regions within the community or whatever we have. So still, I'm trying to understand how this policy is going to be developed with all the different makeups that we have, whether urban, semi-urban, rural, underrepresented, affluent communities, because everybody is going to be impacted.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm going to defer to Metro Plan Orlando staff to answer the policy direction. But I imagine we'd like it to be collaborative in nature and for everything to be complementary to each other. Mike, was there anything you wanted to add there?
No, I think you've got it there, and that you know, we're going through our own plans and policies to see what can be improved, and hoping that sets the examples. But of course, there are issues that we don't govern, things such as, you know, land use, and we don't do road design, et cetera. But So, at each level of government, obviously, you're going to have different areas of policy oversight that you'll have to work within. But yeah, ultimately, that's going to be your plan. But then the coordination is not only about what are you doing policy wise, but how do we balance what we do at the regional level as far as setting our priorities and then collaborating with you locally. For instance, if the county is going to have its own funding source, how do we take advantage of that, but still, reward the county at the regional level, et cetera. So anyway, a lot of moving parts, of course, but yeah, it'll be an ongoing collaboration and constant communication going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Josh?
Hi. So yeah, I was just wondering in relation to the high injury network. We just met, I think it was yesterday, with Kimley Horn, who's doing the Osceola regional action, or the Osceola action plan, and we were talking about the high injury network, and there were some segments in there that they had identified as initially, but where we have construction projects that are going to be starting this year that will likely address those. I know that probably won't be as prevalent with the regional plan, because the regional plan is looking more at the state roads and other non-local roads. But is there a mechanism built into this process whereby the local plan the information from the local plans will trickle up into the regional plan, so that, because maybe an improvement that Osceola or Orange or Seminole or whoever, or any of the jurisdictions are doing, if they've got it funded or under construction, but maybe it wasn't in the most recent data set, if it's addressing some of the concerns that were identified with the initial high injury network, is there a mechanism to be able to further evaluate and see if there's maybe some others that didn't quite, some other segments or intersections that didn't quite trickle all the way up to the top, but they're like say if you're identifying the top 10 and there was a project that was number 11, but it wasn't identified, but a jurisdiction is doing an improvement that might help one of those top 10 corridors or intersections. Is there a mechanism for the regional high injury network to take into consideration that information and maybe update, so the focus can be put on the roadways that don't currently have improvement projects scheduled?
Short answer, yes. I think maybe we should schedule a separate follow-up conversation with the Kimley Horn team, but we can definitely look to see what the next segments might be on your high injury network if you already have improvements planned on some of the other ones. And then you did steal some of my thunder and some subsequent slides in terms of how we're gonna kind of, I guess, mesh everything together and then start to work to identify those improvements on the collective high injury networks.
Okay.
So
yeah,
there is a process that we're
right.
thinking about and would love feedback on it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring that up because I figured there's got to be some nexus there anyways between the regional and the local plans, even if it is just if it's non-local roads. But we just started working on getting that, coordinating with Kimley Horn on getting that information to them. So I know they'll be working on that probably over the next couple of weeks, but that's probably a good time frame to reach out to them and see if a meeting or discussion might be helpful. we'd be happy to join that and see how we can make sure that all the plans mesh together well.
Sounds good. Anything else? Right. So we've been starting to think about some, I guess, progress goals, if you will. So we all know, we all have the ultimate goal of 0 deaths and fatalities on our roadway system in mind. But the plans will identify some interim goals as a way to mark progress. And so really just kind of wanted to start the conversation to establish a collective understanding of what it will take to reach 0. And then what goals are set at the local and county levels will really help inform what the regional goal is, because we can't have a regional goal that's a lot more aggressive or less aggressive than what's coming out of all the other agency plans. So I'm just going to share with you a couple of charts and kind of set the stage, and then here's the portion of the meeting where I really hope to get a lot more people kind of weighing in and providing feedback. So this chart shows the number of fatalities in our region over the past 5 years, and then extrapolates a trend line to 2050. So under current trends, if they continue, we might expect to see about 600 roadway deaths a year by 2050. So taking 2022 as a starting point, we calculated an expected number of fatalities under several annual reduction scenarios. So 1%, 2.5%, 5%, and 10%. So under a 1% reduction scenario, so this is a 1% reduction year over year, by 2050, we might expect to see about 250 deaths per year. And then under a 10% annual reduction scenario, we would expect to see fewer than 20 deaths per year on our transportation system. So starting to think about what it might take to reach 0 in terms of our improvement strategies. And then we started looking at the serious injury trends, and you can see that already the trend is in that downward slope for serious injuries. And so there are some factors that are contributing to that. So some of them are just the lingering effects of the pandemic, because we do have the pandemic crash years in here. And during those years, we did see a decrease in the severe injury crashes, but an increase in the fatal crashes as the crashes were becoming more severe, resulting in fatalities. And then there's also been a lot of improvements to vehicle safety devices. We do have a lot of ongoing safety improvements on roadways in our region that are reflected in here. At one of the top crash locations, we did a little bit of digging, and halfway through the analysis period, an improvement had been put in place, which significantly decreased the number of fatal and severe injury crashes at that location. And then just the effect of national and regional safety campaigns. So just wondering, there's a lot of different factors. So wondering what other things do you think are contributing to this? And then also wanted to note that these trends are something that we're seeing sort of in other metro areas as well. So this is not unique to Metro Plan Orlando. This is happening across the nation. So are there other thoughts on why we're seeing some of these decreases, or do you think we kind of captured the big elements?
Kathleen, I just want to add in that so not only with serious injury, but for just the general crash rate for all injury levels has been declining, and often including, say, for pedestrian crashes, that crash rate. It's strictly at the fatal level where we're seeing the increases. So, when it comes to ped and bike, how much of that is infrastructure improvement and how much of that is exposure? We don't know. We don't have good data on exposure, of course. But the downward trend for serious injuries corresponds to the overall trend for fewer crashes.
Catherine, this is Humberto. Could it be possible to have a subset for vulnerable users for school zones? I know that when we talk about children, especially for elementary and middle school, and we have the speed zoning manual, and now with the red light running cameras and the new legislature to have the automated speed management and whatnot, I think that this category for the school zones, and I know that Adam is here, is very critical because there are several factors. So it's not only the infrastructure, the reduction of the speed, and also we have the sheriff office, but we have the crossing guards, and we have the safe routes to school and suggested. So there are many elements perhaps that could contribute to a safer strategy for vulnerable users. And in my opinion, I think that we should have some sort of discussion specifically for the school zones as part of our strategy, because it will involve the 4 E's actively participating.
Humberto, do you have a layer that shows all of the school zones in Orange County? Because that was a piece of data we have been looking for and have not been successful finding a consistent data set across the region.
So Adam and Lauren, I know when Lauren was working on Orange County, we had bits and pieces, but if we don't have, maybe it should be part of our strategy. I really cannot tell you.
I believe Orange County does have that information only because school zones do change periodically. So Orange County does have information mapped out that shows the different school zones in the county.
Okay, so I will talk to my team and then provide you whatever we have, Catherine.
Yeah,
Thank you,
would be
Lauren.
great.
Appreciate it.
Sure.
I've got a couple
Right,
of
so-
questions on that chart. So it looks like in 2021, it's much higher. And then 2022 drops dramatically. But are there any statistics out already for 2023, seeing we're coming near the close? I don't know if we can take 5 data points and say that the trend is actually downward, or is that, I mean, is there anything from 2023 to signify that it's still dropping, the trend line?
So the preliminary data I've seen from 2023 shows that it's similar but slightly less than 2022 when you look at sort of same month periods. But that data is still being refined and won't be final until at least 6 months into the new year. Mike, anything you wanted to add on that one?
Yeah, I mean, currently what we have available for 23 is just through not even the end of September. I have not looked at that, but that's good to know. Also, we originally were looking at trying to do 10 years, but we knew we had an anomaly when it came to serious injury crashes, that they were being over-reported, and it was just from Florida Highway Patrol. Through the years around 2014 to 15, there was this bump. So I did a lot of analysis on that. Other jurisdictions, other agencies were not reporting that same increase. So we didn't want to have this an artificial drop, by going back to earlier years. We could probably go back to maybe 1 year to 17. But earlier than that, we start getting into that impact of the aberration reporting that we saw in those earlier years.
I wanted to point out we have a couple of comments and questions in the chat, one from Patrick and from Shad. So Patrick asks, how much of the downward trend in serious injury do we think is maybe due to a conversion of crashes from serious injury to fatality? More accurately, I guess I'm asking about the trend in proportion between fatality and serious injury amongst all crash outcomes over time.
Yeah, great question. And I think part of the reduction in serious injury is correlated with that increase in fatalities as vehicles get heavier and as people are driving at faster speeds. Especially during the pandemic with lower congestion levels, we did see that increase in fatal crashes. So I would say those two are definitely correlated.
And then Shad points out another potential reason. He says, regarding the drop in serious injury, are the prevalence of more safety features in vehicles a part of this? Seems like more cars on the road have intelligence to reduce crashes.
Say that's definitely a part of it. So we do want to give credit to all of those things that are contributing, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
He also wants to know if there's data on model year of the vehicle over time.
Yeah, I don't have anything handy, but I'll look to see if one of my colleagues has done any research on that. All right, so then we combined the fatal and serious injury crashes. And I kind of had some of RJ's concerns of, does 5 years really make a trend and that steep of a trend line reduction? So for the purposes of this chart, we assumed that serious injuries would kind of stay at about the same level as they have from sort of the last 5-year average. And that fatalities would increase based on the current trends, as I showed you a few graphs previously. So this is sort of the combined trend line with then some reduction scenarios from that 1% to 10%. So here we kind of just wanted to start opening up the conversation in terms of what folks thought was a reasonable reduction range to really start targeting. So we kind of took all that data and filtered it down into 3 scenarios. So scenario 1 is kind of the business as usual. It would likely continue to yield some reductions in serious injury crashes, while fatal crashes might continue to increase. And then overall, we would expect the annual reduction level to be in that 1% to 4% range. And then acknowledging that some of the serious injury reductions might start to plateau. Then under scenario 2, this was really sort of the focus safety program. So in this scenario, it assumes really no new funding for safety, or at least no new significant funding for safety improvements, but perhaps just a refocusing of what funding is available on really prioritizing those safety improvements. And then scenario 3, sort of an accelerated safety program. So this assumes that we can find some additional funding for capital improvements and behavioral change campaigns, enforcement, improvements on that post-crash care side as well. And then we really we'd need to start thinking about legislative changes under the scenario 3. So just wanted to get some initial thoughts on what scenarios folks thought would be appropriate for us to really target and start thinking about different countermeasure strategies and what's really going to be realistic for the region. Kelly?
So this might be the elephant in the room, but the data show it's at least majority state roads. So what's the state's plan? I mean, what are we doing as a region versus what is the state going to do to address the issue? Because we could do everything possible as a region and we still wouldn't be able to achieve this because of the state roads.
Yeah, that's a great observation. So Laureen, I saw you on the call earlier, not sure if you're still on, if you wanted to provide any feedback.
No, I mean,
Sorry to put
this
you on the
is,
spot.
it's all good. I mean, this is obviously, maybe it's not obvious, but it's something that we talk about quite a bit. You know, we do recognize that while more crashes occur on local roads, there are more fatalities on state roads, and that's likely due to speed. Speed tends to be higher on state roads. We're continuing to set, you know, target speeds on all of our projects and do whatever we can, but funding is very tight. It's a tough time right now. It doesn't mean that we're not continuing to look at every opportunity we can to spend our HSIP, which are the federal dollars, in all the places that we can within our district. And we have 9 counties, right? So MetroPlan represents 3 of those 9 counties. So we've got a pretty large region that we need to cover with not a lot of funding. It's not exactly the answer you're looking for, but I know that during this call, I've been trying to research, you know, are there opportunities if MetroPlan or the cities or the counties or the, you know, towns are successful in getting other federal grant funding, you know, do we have opportunity to maybe provide part of that non-federal funding if there's an intersection with a state road and things like that. So, you know, we're definitely open to any opportunity that we can find to maximize that funding. But I mean, that's what it comes down. We would do everything if we could. It's tight. So.
Josh?
So I've got a question. It kind of I saw in the chat. It was from what's the downside of going with scenario 3? So I kind of want to elaborate on that question a little bit from my perspective, anyways. First of all, I guess the regional effort and the vision of, is there, when this started and moving forward, the vision, is there a year date or a certain percentage per year of 0 deaths and serious injuries? Like, because I'm thinking if it's a certain percentage per year, then we would probably want to go with the scenario that would get us the highest percentage. But then I can have this same concern that I think several other people do, and Lorraine also expressed it as well, that times are pretty tough right now. I mean, construction costs are skyrocketing and things are very expensive. So how can we, is there like a scenario 2.5 where we accelerate the safety program as much as possible or as much as feasible based on available funding and finding, like as Lorraine also mentioned, finding partnership opportunities that might bring us above that 6% in scenario 2, but not quite to the 10%, because I'm thinking the 10% is probably, I could be wrong, but it's probably guessing, and I don't know, but I wouldn't say unlimited funds, but a much higher funding percentage than what we currently have available. And I could be wrong, but yeah, I guess is there a way we could have a scenario in there that accounts for the realities of budgeting constraints, or does scenario 3 already take that into consideration?
Yeah, I would say this is all blank slate, so we can create any sort of different permutations, and I think sort of acknowledging different funding cycles and how you may have different opportunities in different timeframes, and I guess opportunities to take advantage of additional funds available in some fiscal cycles than others. Let's see, Lauren, I think I saw your hand next.
Yeah, so I guess maybe a way to tackle this would be as like a phased approach. So meaning that maybe within the first 1 to 3 years, we look at scenario 1, and then the next 4 to 6, scenario 2, and then continue moving upwards. I think that with all the federal funding, especially as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, I think if we can show that we are putting our penny where it counts, we'll be in a lot better position for some of this federal funding. So we don't get rid of anything. We just say, you know, we have to phase it out, and this is how we start, and, you know, give ourselves some room in order to actually achieve some of these goals.
Great idea. Let's see, RJ, I think you had your hand next.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering about some of these safety programs. Like I live over by UCF, and there's one in full swing right now. It's the Orange County UCF safety project with University Boulevard and Alafaya Trail. And you know, they're putting a 10-foot path along Alafaya on the east side, and then they're also going to install a 4-foot fence along there. And, you know, the whole idea behind that is because there's been several student deaths on Alafaya and University. And, you know, this is supposed to prevent that, right? So what I'm trying to understand, I can't recall any other safety type programs of this scale in this area, but I'm sure there's been some in the region. So I think we need to look at the success rate of those projects, like before and afters. Like, we've got a good opportunity here to know what's been, what accidents have occurred in this area, and then maybe over the next 3 to 5 years, take a look back and say, okay, did we achieve the goal, you know, of reducing fatalities or serious injuries? So I think that's something that really has to be looked at, because I don't hear a lot about that of you know, looking back and going, okay, this actually had the right positive effect. Maybe I just don't know, but you know, I'm just putting it out there as something that because I don't know, knowing the demographics of the people that live in this area, I just see people jumping over that 4-foot fence and doing what they did before, because there's bars right across the street, you know, and they come and go at 2 o'clock in the morning and whatever. And that's a lot of times when these deaths happen. So I don't know. I'm just trying to understand if these safety programs are going to be, how effective they are in the long run.
I do know, I know Umberto had his hand up first, but I think Lorene has a response to the before-after study.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Yes, RJ, that is a very, very good point. And that's actually, I know out of our Office of Safety in District 5, we are looking at all projects that we've set a target speed on. We're doing before and afters on yeah, did we lower the speed on that project, and kind of looking at, you know, what did we do on that project that may have affected that change? Those projects are just now starting to finish construction. So we haven't been able to come out and say, this is what we did yet, but we are actively doing that. The OBT project is going to be a prime example. I really believe of showing that you can slow those cars down and reduce those fatalities and those interactions. So it is something that we are working on.
Great. Umberto?
Yes, thank you so much, Lorraine, for that. Of course, as a former FDOT employee, and having an appreciation for the programs. One of the things that we're looking in Orange County is that we have so many different divisions and such a large budget, but we noticed there have been a disconnect in terms of our design, construction, and operations and maintenance in some of these projects. For instance, we're looking now as developing policy. Whenever we're doing the resurfacing, which it seems very logical that this is the perfect time for us not only to address the pavement life, but also to take a look at some of the pedestrian challenges like ramps, or if we're going to be doing some bike lanes and whatnot. But it hasn't been happening here in Orange County. So the Vision Zero action plan that we're developing is not only looking at a project, but looking at a program as a strategy, how we can approach this. For instance, any sidewalk, we have sidewalk programs, we have ADA programs, we have bike and ped programs. And yes, all of them, they have similar objectives. However, they are implemented sporadically or disconnectedly. And then, so we're not getting the best bang for the buck. So part of this is how do we integrate all of these approaches? For instance, also, when we are doing the planning, we have the RCA. One of the things that the community, especially the commissioners, they are requesting is what elements are you incorporating about safety? Because if you have a horizontal or if you have a vertical deflection, because there are obstructions, already you are decreasing the speeds within a certain corridor. Now, a signal might just provide some gaps and do a stop and go. But if it is on green, and if it is a tangent, you might just push it 20 miles beyond the speed limit of what it is because you can. So how do we integrate this? Of course, funding is a critical component, but the challenges for us, and in our presentation to the Board of County Commissioners, and I can provide that presentation, but the concept is the umbrella. So Vision Zero is going to be the umbrella for all of these programs. So part of our SOP is that we're going to be approaching the resurfacing projects or the 3 Rs similar to what the DOT has been doing for the longest time, and that is going to be helping us out. The other thing is the lighting at the intersections, because that is a separate program that we have. So how do we talk about incorporating these safety countermeasures in a holistic manner? So there is a lot. So for us, it's not the challenge to look at projects individually, but how each one of our projects or programs as a municipality or as a county are moving forward the Vision Zero. And I know that in Orange County, we do have challenges, but our action plan is going to be addressing that. But I want to pose that question for the rest of the other counties, municipalities. Do your existing systems or processes allow you to implement in a holistic manner the Vision Zero countermeasures? And if they don't, then what can we do so it is comprehensive and we can maximize the dollar investment to get the results that we want?
Great feedback there. And then I think I saw, I guess, Josh, is your hand up from before, or do you have a new comment to add?
I've got a new comment.
Okay.
It's what kind of building off of the last one. And so I mentioned after my last comment about potentially a phased approach for the scenarios. As we talk through this more, that's, to me at least, seeming to make more sense. I don't know if we necessarily would want to start with scenario one, because I think we want to shoot higher than just business as usual. But I mean, we know there are safety program funds available, and if we have this Vision Zero action plan and then the implementation shows helps identify where those safety issues are. I think that helps. That does help the focus of where those safety dollars should be spent. And then as we go along and find more partnerships and hopefully the construction market and all the items needed for construction, the costs at some point level out or don't increase so much to where we can more easily estimate, then we can start looking at adding additional funding to get closer to scenario 3. It's just my 2 cents anyways.
Nicole?
Yeah, I was just listening to all this, all these comments, which are awesome and have like some collective feedback is one I really like Umberto's point. It was something that I've been thinking about is I think we put a lot of pressure on the safety program and safety funding. So the highway safety improvement program specifically. I think there's a lot of other resources out there, not just the Safe Streets for All grants, but we've got a nice list now of other types of funding where we can leverage safety improvements. So I think that could be a value add, Catherine, as we progress through this study. 2 is it's not all about the funding, right? What are the opportunities to really operationalize safety into everything that we're doing, those repaving programs, maintenance, implementation of complete streets policies and speed policies and things like that. And then the third point, which to me always seems so easy, is like, oh, we just need to coordinate, right? We need to leverage each other and our own resources to bring like a collective good to a corridor or an intersection, right? It's not just like one person doing it. It should be all of us kind of working together. There is a really nice research underway right now on that particular topic. It's called the multi-solving safety approach. It's stepping away from silos to achieve a safer system. And the whole point of it is around coordination and particular solutions, like how a roundabout has, safety value, but it also has mobility value. It also has climate value. So it's all about thinking about particular solutions that, one solution that addresses multiple issues. So trying to think that way about it versus putting something here and here and here. But what's the one thing you could put here that has, multiple benefits? So just some perspective on the funding and how to kind of get around it and think of other creative ways to implement some of these things.
Great. Well, this has been a great, I would say, start of the conversation. And I'm looking at the time here, we have about 8 minutes left in our scheduled time. So I'm just going to quickly get to a few other things. We do have our next meeting scheduled in January, so I think that'll be an opportunity perhaps to come back and revisit this discussion with a little bit of additional information. So this chart here was just really, I did some calculations on how many lives we might save under each of the reduction strategies. And then I think kind of thinking about that phased approach, really starting to think about what are some near-term strategies and solutions. So as many have pointed out, that speed reduction is critical. So right now, just on the regional high injury network, there's a big disconnect between the posted speed and then the prevailing travel speed. So there's some opportunities there related to, I would say, enforcement and then prioritizing engineering countermeasures that really encourage people to drive at the appropriate target speed. Then looking at improvements to top intersections, including signal timing strategies, really looking at those location-specific pedestrian improvements. So perhaps opportunities for more marked and controlled crossing locations, especially co-located with those activity centers like transit stops. We did see a high rate of people in vehicles who died not wearing seatbelts. So increased click it or ticket campaigns. more visible sobriety checkpoints. And then looking at just some additional funding and promotion of some of the motorcycle training courses that are out there, as well as some bicyclist safety courses such as Cycling Savvy. So really looking at some of those behavioral opportunities and just training folks. So that was kind of what we were really starting to think about in terms of near-term strategies. And I think our next meeting will be a great opportunity to really dive a little bit deeper into what those specifically look like, and then start doing some estimates on what types of reductions we might see. So just want to briefly touch on a couple of next steps. So as each of the counties and local agencies starts to finalize their high injury networks, we're going to work to reconcile where there's overlap, and then start to schedule some focus meetings to have conversations. We'll want to identify what's already planned on those networks. And as Josh alluded, there's probably some roadways where construction is imminent and we probably have limited opportunities to do things. But those, in my mind, are great projects where we might want to monitor the progress and effectiveness of those improvements over time. Then we'll probably have a second tier of roadways where maybe there's something planned within the next 3 to 5 years. Perhaps there's an opportunity to kind of take a closer look at some potential safety improvements for those corridors to just provide some additional enhancements. And then there's a whole set of roadways where there's not anything imminently planned, where we'll work to identify completely new countermeasures and strategies. And then, of course, we'll need to have lots of conversations with the agency that maintains those roadways, really talk through what's feasible, practical, what are maybe some low-cost, quick build type opportunities. And then looking at some high-level project cost estimates, looking at what funding sources might be available, as Nicole mentioned. And by the way, Nicole is my colleague up in our Washington, D.C. office, and she's working on a lot of other MPO action plans as well. So I thought she could have some good insight on the call today. Sort of seeing what other opportunities might there be. And then really thinking towards next June when the next SS4A grant opportunity arises, to see what we might want to submit there regionally. And then we're also starting to think about prioritization criteria. And so really looking at the high injury network score, whether or not it's in an underserved community, whether or not there's support for a particular improvement. So we'll definitely be doing a deeper dive into this topic on our next call. And then wanted to highlight that at the regional plan level, we did provide some guidance on Vision Zero resolutions to implement in combination with adopting the Vision Zero action plan. So really just wanted to highlight some of the key elements that would need to be included in those resolutions, which includes preparing the action plan, which everybody is working on, establishing a date and some interim goals. And so there is more information available on that if anybody needs that. And then just a reminder here on the schedule. So really we're starting to look at countermeasures and the policy review. And as we enter into the new year, really starting to look at specific roadways and corridors and sort of the behavioral strategy side of it as well. So our next meeting is set for January 16th, so be on the lookout for a calendar invite on that. And then if there's any volunteers for the benchmarking subcommittee, just reach out to Mike, because we'd like to get that on the calendar as well. And don't forget that the hub site is open, ready for feedback, and we have the great video to share. So let's see, I know we have to get to the public comment piece of it. So Mike, did you want to see if there was any public comment, and then we can go back to see if there's any additional discussion and if folks are open to staying a little beyond 4:30.
Right. So, yeah, if there are any one of our attendees who aren't task force members who have a question, you can either use the raise hand function on your desktop, or if you're calling in from a smartphone, you can do *9. And we will allow you to speak. All right, I am not seeing any raised hands, so we can wrap up if you're going to have any other last comments from task force members.
All right, Bill?
Had to find unmute. Catherine, can we get the PowerPoints from the 2 previous meetings and today as well? It just makes it easier to communicate things onto our other, our team members here. That'd be a great
Yes.
help. Thank you.
Most definitely. The other last comments or thoughts?
Thank you very much. Great job.
Great. Thank you, and looking forward to continuing the conversation next year.